I never really thought much about that beach house. It's been in my family for years, long before I was born. A small, white cottage with peeling shutters and a wraparound porch that faces the sea. Most people would probably describe it as charming or cozy, but I always found something different about it. Not bad, not even scary, just still, like the house itself was holding its breath. We only ever went there in the summer. That was the rule. The house had no heating, no internet, barely even phone service. It was old and bare bones, the kind of place that creaks when you walk, shifts when the wind blows, and smells like salt and old wood no matter how many windows you open. But this story didn't happen in the summer. It was early November, right before winter really settled in. Cold enough to make you wish you'd brought gloves, but not so cold that you couldn't work outside. My parents decided to drive out to the beach house for a weekend just to close it up. As they always said, trim the garden, bring in the furniture, board the windows, and make sure everything was locked up tight before the snow came. I almost didn't go. I had a paper due, and I really didn't feel like spending 2 nights in that quiet, lonely house while my friends were back in the city. But my mom insisted, and part of me felt guilty letting them do all the heavy lifting alone. So I agreed. We arrived late on Friday afternoon. The sun was already dipping below the horizon, casting long orange shadows across the dunes. The house looked smaller in the off-season, emptier, surrounded by leafless shrubs and a gray sky that made everything feel colder than it really was. When we stepped inside, the silence hit me right away. Not the peaceful kind, the dense kind, like the house hadn't heard a voice in months and was trying to remember how to listen. We unpacked quickly. Just the essentials: blankets, canned food, kettle. The power was still working, but we kept the lights off in the rooms we weren't using. My dad turned on the little space heater in the kitchen and settled at the table with a book, while my mom and I checked the garage. She liked to store supplies there during the winter: garden tools, empty flower pots, some old chairs that we didn't want left out in the snow. Now, the garage is technically connected to the house, but only through a single door that leads into the kitchen. You have to go down 4 narrow wooden steps to get to it. It's slightly sunken below ground level. There's one overhead light right in the center, and the switch is up by the door to the kitchen. When it's off, that room gets pitch black. No windows, no natural light, just a black square full of boxes and dust. The light had been acting up the last few years. It flickered sometimes when you turned it on. Sometimes it would go out completely and then come back a few seconds later. My dad always promised he'd fix it, but he never did. That night, while he was upstairs reading, Mom and I were in the garage packing up. She was at the far end of the room, sorting through a stack of folded tarps. I was near the stairs, putting some things into a cardboard box. We weren't really talking, just moving around in the quiet. The sound of tape ripping and cardboard flaps being folded echoing against the concrete walls. Then the light went out, just like that. No warning. Total blackness. I let out a soft ugh and froze in place. The silence got heavier. "Mom," I said, half laughing, trying to make light of it. She didn't answer right away. I felt footsteps approach, soft, careful. I figured she was coming over to me, so I reached my hand out blindly in the dark. I touched someone's hand. I remember the warmth of it, the shape of the fingers. It was a full grip, not just a brush. A hand that wrapped around mine and squeezed gently, like a reassurance. like someone saying, "I'm here with you." I laughed nervously. "Oh, thank God you're here. I hate being in the dark." That's when I heard my mother's voice from the other side of the garage. She said, "You're closer to the door. Ask your dad to open it so we get some light in here." I froze. The hand was still holding mine. Her voice had come from at least 6 meters away. My brain didn't process it all at once. It lagged behind. One part of me was still standing there, hand in hand with what I thought was my mother. The other part was screaming inside. I dropped the hand. "No!" I yanked my hand away. My skin was crawling. I backed up into the stairs and yelled my dad's name, so loud my voice cracked. The panic in my voice must have told him everything, because within seconds, the kitchen door burst open and light flooded the garage from behind him. There was nothing there, just me, my mom still on the far side of the room, and empty air. But I swear to you, there had been something standing next to me in that darkness. Something solid, something warm, and it held my hand like it knew me. My dad kept asking me what had happened, but I couldn't get the words out right away. I just stood there, panting, trying to explain something I didn't even understand myself. My mom came over, confused and a little shaken just from the way I'd screamed. When I told them what I felt, that someone had been standing next to me, holding my hand, they both looked at me like I was in shock. And maybe I was. We checked the garage together. Every corner, every box, every wall. There was nothing. No signs of anyone being there. No footprints on the dusty floor. No sign of forced entry. Just the familiar smell of cold concrete and old paint. My dad offered up a logical explanation, of course. Said maybe I'd brushed against a hanging coat or a tool handle. Said the panic and darkness made me imagine the rest. But it wasn't like that. I know what it feels like to touch an object, to bump into something and mistake it for more than it is. This wasn't that. I didn't bump into anything. I was touched. Someone squeezed my hand, and it felt human. The strange part, the part that still messes with me, is that it didn't even feel threatening. That moment, before I heard my mother's voice, I felt comforted, like someone was standing beside me in the dark, offering silent reassurance. Only when I realized it couldn't be her did the terror flood in. I barely slept that night. My parents, of course, went on like nothing happened. My mom still thought maybe I was just stressed, or tired, or reacting to the flickering light. She didn't push it, but I could tell she didn't believe me, not fully. My dad even offered to stay in the garage for a few minutes to prove there's nothing spooky about it. I didn't laugh, not even a fake chuckle. I just went to bed, shut the door, and tried to tell myself I had imagined it. But the house wasn't done with me. That night, I kept hearing things. Faint footsteps above my room, even though no one was up there. The occasional creak of the hallway floorboards, like someone was pacing slowly back and forth. And once, just once, I swore I heard someone whisper my name. I chalked it up to paranoia. That's what I had to do, because the alternative meant acknowledging that something had followed me out of that garage. Something unseen. Something that had touched me. The next morning, I felt like hell. I looked like it too, eyes puffy, skin pale. My mom didn't mention it, but she gave me that quiet mom look. The one that says I'm worried, but I don't want to make it worse. We spent the day doing the usual winterizing work, bringing in the porch chairs, cleaning out the gutters, raking the yard. The weather had turned colder overnight, and the sky was this flat, dull gray that made everything feel twice as lifeless. The whole time, I felt like something was off, not just in the house, but in the air around us, like we weren't alone. I kept catching myself glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone standing at a window or watching us from behind the trees near the edge of the property. But there was never anything there. Then came the second incident. We were back inside. My dad was in the shed fixing something, and my mom was upstairs taking down the curtains to store for the season. I was in the living room, folding up the thin summer blankets we always left on the couch. I wasn't thinking about the garage anymore. I was just glad to be inside, where it was warm. That's when I heard the door, the one that leads to the garage. It creaked open, not all the way, just a few inches, enough to make a sound, enough for me to see the sliver of black behind it. I stood completely still, blanket in my hands, watching. It didn't move again. I waited, expecting my dad to step through, or maybe my mom, but no one came. After about 20 seconds of silence, I walked slowly toward it. I called out, "Dad." Nothing. I reached the door, pushed it shut, and locked it from the inside. Then I turned and went straight to find my mom. She hadn't left the second floor. And my dad, still out in the shed, tools in hand. There was no one else in the house. But that door, one I know I had closed, had somehow opened again, silently, on its own. And the worst part, when I pushed it shut, I felt resistance. Not strong, just enough that it didn't swing as easily as it should have, like there had been a draft, or someone had just let go of the handle. I didn't say anything to them, not that time. I didn't want to sound paranoid, but in my chest, something had changed. That silence I used to feel in the beach house, it wasn't silence anymore. It was presence. Something was there, and it was watching. After that second incident, I stopped pretending everything was normal. I didn't talk about it out loud, not to my parents or anyone else, but inside, I had fully accepted that something was happening in that house, something I couldn't explain. The next 2 days passed without anything obvious. We finished packing up the house for the winter, double-checked the locks, drained the plumbing, all the routine stuff. But even in the quiet moments, I couldn't shake this pressure building in my chest. It was like the walls were holding their breath. We planned to head back to the city early the next morning. That night would be our last in the house. And that's when things escalated. It started just after midnight. I was lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind outside. The room was cold, colder than I remembered it ever being. I was curled up under layers of blankets, trying to ignore the sharp draft slipping through the window frame. My parents were asleep down the hall. Then I heard it. A knock. Not loud, not rushed. Just 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the wall, right behind my headboard. I froze. The head of my bed was against the outer wall. No pipes, no shared wall, nothing that should be making that sound. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just stared ahead, waiting, counting the seconds. Then it came again. 3 knocks. I sat up, every muscle in my body tense. I turned around slowly and stared at the wall. My first thought was that it had to be something falling outside, maybe a tree branch. But the sound was too clean, too specific, and it hadn't been windy enough for that. I got up and walked to the window. Outside, everything was still. The trees didn't even sway. That's when I heard the whispering. Soft, muffled, like someone was speaking through the walls. I pressed my ear to the plaster and held my breath. There it was, definitely a voice. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the rhythm of speech, the rise and fall of a sentence, like someone was murmuring a secret just on the other side of the wall. I pulled back from the wall, so fast I nearly tripped. Something inside me just kept saying, "Don't listen. Don't try to hear what it's saying." I turned on the light, sat on the bed, and stared at the door. I thought about waking my parents, about saying, "Hey, something's not right in this place." But again, I stayed quiet. I didn't want them to think I was losing it. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept the lamp on. I kept my eyes open. And somewhere around 3 a.m., I saw the shadow. It passed by the crack under my bedroom door. Slowly, like someone walking down the hall with no shoes on. It didn't stop at my door. It didn't knock. It just moved by, completely silent. The hallway didn't creak like it usually did when someone walked on it. Just a shadow. I never heard a door open, never heard footsteps fade. And when I finally worked up the nerve to check, the hallway was empty, still, cold. The next morning, I was pale and exhausted. My mom looked at me over breakfast and asked if I was okay. I said I hadn't slept well. She just nodded and sipped her coffee like she already knew what I meant. We didn't talk about it, but I noticed something odd as we were leaving. She double-checked all the windows twice. She locked every door with extra care. She made sure the curtains were all tightly shut. And then, just before we stepped outside, she stood in the living room and looked around for a long time. Not like someone saying goodbye to a vacation home, but like someone trying to convince themselves it was safe to leave. When we got in the car, she was quiet. About an hour into the drive, I asked her if she ever heard anything strange in the house. Her eyes flicked toward me, then back to the road. She didn't say anything for a moment, just drove. Then she said, "You know how some places just feel hollow, like they're waiting for something?" I nodded. "That house doesn't feel hollow," she said. "It feels full." That was all she said. We didn't talk about it again. Not until months later. And by then, the house was already calling me back. Winter came and went. I tried not to think about the house during those months, but it kept slipping into my thoughts in the quiet moments, when I was walking to work in the cold, or lying in bed staring at the ceiling like I had that night. I'd think about the whispering, the hand in the dark, that shadow passing under my door. Sometimes I'd dream I was back there, but in the dream, I wasn't alone. There was always something else with me in the house, something watching. By early spring, my parents were already making plans to reopen the place for the season. It was part of the routine. Drive up, do some light cleaning, check the pipes, make sure the roof hadn't caved in from the snow. Nothing unusual. I thought maybe I'd skip it that year, say I had work, or make up a reason. But then my mom asked me, and her tone caught me off guard. She didn't say, "Do you want to come?" She said, "You should come." I said yes before I could think about it too hard. We drove up on a Friday, just the two of us this time. My dad was staying in the city for a few days. She packed sandwiches and tea and told me we'd only be there overnight. A quick check-in, then back home. The house looked the same as always from the outside. Peaceful, quiet. The snow had mostly melted. The shutters were still closed tight. But as soon as I stepped inside, I felt it. Not something specific, just that presence again. That heaviness, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks, when everything in the air feels electric. We went about our business like usual, opened the windows, aired out the musty rooms, flushed the water lines, and started dusting. My mom put on a record in the living room, some old jazz album we always played on those weekends. It made the house feel normal for a little while, but as evening crept in, that fragile sense of normalcy cracked. It started with the lights. We were sitting in the kitchen, finishing up dinner, when the bulb above the table flickered. Just a quick stutter, then another, and then it went out entirely. I thought maybe the fuse had tripped, but the fridge was still humming. The hallway light was on. It was just the kitchen. Then the record player stopped. Not a scratch or a skip. It just stopped, mid-song, like someone had picked up the needle and set it aside. We both sat there for a second in silence, forks paused mid-air. My mom slowly got up and walked into the living room. I heard her restart the player, heard the music come back, only this time it was warped, slowed down. The melody dragged in a way that made it almost unrecognizable, like the record was melting. She turned it off. We didn't talk about it. We just moved to the porch and stayed there until the sun went down. Later that night, I was lying in my old room, staring at the same ceiling in the same bed. My mom was sleeping in the master bedroom. I told myself I wouldn't stay up all night again, that I'd be logical, calm, rational. That didn't last. Around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps. Not above, not below, inside the walls, like someone walking slowly along the perimeter of the room, right behind the drywall. The sound of pressure shifting on old wood, of something dragging its feet. I sat up, heart pounding, listening. It made a full circle around the room. Then it stopped near the closet. And then, 3 knocks. Soft, deliberate, on the inside of the closet door. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just stared at the door, waiting. The knob twitched. Not much, just a tiny, quick motion, like someone had rested a hand on it from the other side. That's when I got up and ran. I didn't even think. I just bolted out of the room and down the hall, heart racing. I opened the door to my mom's room and found her sitting up in bed, already awake, staring at the door. I heard it too, she whispered. We didn't sleep after that. We left early that morning. Didn't finish half of what we came to do. On the drive back, I finally asked her, "Has anything ever happened to you in that house?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "When I was your age, I stayed there alone for a weekend. Your grandparents were visiting friends. The first night, I heard someone call my name from the attic." I stared at her. "Did you check?" She shook her head. I was too scared, but I heard it again the next night. It was louder that time, closer, like it had come down the stairs. I asked her why she never told me. She didn't answer, just stared out the window. There was a silence between us for a while, and then she said quietly, "Some places aren't haunted by the dead. Some places are just wrong." Weeks passed after that last visit, but I couldn't let it go. I thought the distance would help, that once I was back in my apartment, back in the rhythm of city life, I'd forget the sound of those footsteps, the knock from inside the closet. But it didn't work like that. If anything, the silence of my apartment became its own kind of threat. Every creak of the floorboards at night made my skin crawl. I'd lie awake, waiting for something to move in the corner of my eye. I started sleeping with the hallway light on. The smallest noises, a door settling, water pipes ticking, set off full body tension, like I was back in that bed again, staring at the ceiling. And then things started happening here. At first, it was small. My keys weren't where I left them. The bathroom light would be on when I knew I turned it off. Once, I found my bedroom window cracked open in the morning. It was locked the night before. I told myself I was tired, that it was stress, that my imagination was getting the best of me. But then I started dreaming about the house again. Only this time, it wasn't the house exactly. It was the feeling of it, the presence. I'd be standing in the hallway in the dream, and I'd hear something breathing behind me, always behind me, but I could never turn around. I'd wake up gasping, heart racing, drenched in sweat, and always, I felt like something had followed me back. It escalated one night in early May. I'd just gotten home from work. It was late, almost midnight. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my bag on the table, and went straight to the bathroom. I remember standing at the sink, washing my hands. Everything was normal, until I looked up at the mirror. There was a handprint on the glass. It was faint, like a smudge from someone leaning forward, but it was fresh. I hadn't touched the mirror, and it was too high to be mine. I froze. Behind me, in the reflection, the bathroom door slowly began to swing shut. There was no draft, no window open. I turned around. No one there. But the moment I stepped back into the hallway, I felt it. That pressure again. That presence. Like I wasn't alone in my own apartment. And then the lights flickered. Just once. A single blink. But it was enough. I didn't sleep that night. I left every light on. I sat in the living room with a blanket around me, waiting for the sun. When I told my mom the next day, she didn't act surprised. I've always believed places can attach themselves to people, she said. That some energies, they don't stay behind. They follow. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just asked, what am I supposed to do? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, go back. Back to the house. Alone. Whatever this is, it started there. Maybe it needs to end there too. I didn't want to. Every instinct in me said not to. But I couldn't live like this, trapped in my own home, waiting for something to happen. So I made a decision. The following weekend, I drove back. Alone. It was just after dusk when I pulled up to the house. The trees swayed quietly in the wind. The front steps creaked under my weight as I walked up. I didn't even unpack. I just walked inside and closed the door behind me. It was colder than it should have been. Dust hung in the air like a fine mist. The house hadn't been opened in weeks, yet the kitchen light was flickering when I turned it on, just like before. I stood there, in the center of the living room, and waited. Nothing happened at first, but the longer I stood there, the more I felt it. That weight, that pressure, like the house had exhaled, and now I was inside its lungs. I called out quietly, I don't know what you are. My voice echoed too much, but I know you were here. I know you're still here. Silence. Then a creak upstairs. I turned slowly, looking up toward the landing. One of the hallway doors was open. I hadn't opened it. I climbed the stairs. Each step felt like it could give out, like the wood was protesting every movement. When I reached the top, I looked down the hallway. All the doors were closed, except one. Mine, the one I'd run from weeks earlier. I walked to it. My hand was trembling as I touched the knob. Inside, it was pitch black. I stepped in, and immediately I knew. It was waiting. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't something I could see or hear. But it was there in that room, like the air had shape and teeth and eyes. I whispered, "What do you want?" There was no answer, only silence. And in that silence, I realized, some things don't want to be seen. They want to be felt. And I had been feeling it long before the lights went out in the garage. I backed out of the room, closed the door gently, and left. I never went back. But here's the thing. Sometimes in my apartment, when the night is quiet and the lights are off, I still feel it. That pressure, that watching. Not always, but enough. And when it's really late, sometimes I wake up, and the closet door is just a little more open than I remember leaving it. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to Beyond Fear and hit the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Here, you'll find more real stories filled with mystery, psychological horror, and the supernatural every week. Before you go, make sure to check out the 2 videos that just popped up in the end screen. I promise, they'll leave you with goosebumps. See you next time, if you dare.